So the focus on this Let's Talk is on the topic of thriving during crisis. And our host, our special guest for today is Rachel Tipograph, founder and CEO of MikMak. For those who are new to Let's Talk, there's one singular purpose of these Let's Talk calls: to create an environment where participants can help support each other during this global crisis and beyond. More than ever, we come together as a community to help support and uplift each other. Hold on 1 second. Sorry for the pauses. For those, so about Let's Talk, there are no presentations, no talking heads. This is open discussion where the group can support each other wholeheartedly. So if you can, please turn on your video because we really want you in this conversation. It's just not me or Rachel or whoever it is speaking. It's about you too and having a dialogue. So if you don't mind, turn on your video. We're gonna do a quick exercise. For this next activity, top right-hand side, put yourself on gallery mode so we kind of look like the Brady Bunch picture so you can see everyone. So for those new to Let's Talk, we always start our calls with a series of questions. Okay. We usually change week by week, but I'm going to bring an old one back today. For some of you guys that have kind of been on the call since March, it's going to be very familiar. This is the thumbs up or thumbs down activity. So, really quickly, how's your day been going? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. Has it been good? How's your day been going? How have these past 7 months been for you? How are your teams handling this pandemic? How are your loved ones? Do you feel you're getting the support you need at home? At work? How are you feeling about the near future? For the next part, I want you to raise your hands. How many of you have lost a job in 2020? How many of you have lost a loved one in 2020? How many of you are fearful of our political situation in 2020? How many of you are feeling anxious about the future? Okay. So I guess if you can kind of see from the hands up and hands down, all of us are going through our own journeys, our own struggles. But I'm hoping at the end of this conversation, we're going to have an understanding of how we're connected, in a deeper way. So for this next part, top right-hand side, once again, please put this on speaker mode. Today's discussion is on how do you thrive during times of crisis and change? And let me premise something right here. During the start of the pandemic, I would see these freaking posts on social media, and I'm paraphrasing, but they all went something like this. If you haven't started a new business, read a dozen books, trained like Kobe Bryant during the pandemic, learned a new language, learned to code, then you've wasted your time. Bullshit. Whoever posted this did not have kids. During that period, I could barely take a shower or get out of my bed, let alone conquer the world. I was trying to keep my family alive. I was trying to pay my mortgage because I had just been laid off by Fortune. Just like millions of others and many of the folks on this call. It was kind of like this F you self-help bullshit, right? However, there's some element of truth to this post. What you make of adversity and challenge is really about choice. It's really about the decisions you make on an everyday level. You can choose to worry day and night. You can choose to get out of bed. You could choose to endlessly read social media posts and the news about the crazy shit that's happening in the world or in politics or with COVID, or you can do something about it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't allow yourself time to grieve. When I first got laid off at Fortune, I cried every day for a week. What made it extremely painful was that I actually had to lay off my entire team. So I was creating a startup within Fortune. And when COVID happened, the funding for my program at Fortune eliminated. So what was hard was that there was all these lives that depended on me. And I was literally in a depressive stupor for like a week. And then what I ended up doing was I woke up one day about a week later and I started the website for Community of 7. I then met with my team, all of us who had got laid off, and we've actually been meeting every week since March. And I promised them that I would either help them find their next job or that I would build this business so that I could hire them back. I stopped waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning to read the grim reports and death rates of COVID. One of my best friends and neighbors got me out to run with her. I hadn't run in 10 years. And at first, I could barely run a mile. Last Sunday, I ran 8 miles, the most I've ran in 20 years. I started listening to podcasts and reading books about grit, leadership, and hope. I know I'm sounding like a freaking cliche, just like the post, but I'm realizing that there might be some elements of truth to that. One of my best leadership lessons happened when I was learning to drive at age 16. I clearly remember my driving instructor telling me, your car will follow your eyes. Wherever you look, the car will go. So always place your vision on where you want to go rather than where you don't want to go. Nevertheless, I kept on finding myself looking at the car next to me, behind me, the lines on the road and the shoulders of the road, just to make sure I stayed in the middle of the lane and clear of everyone. My natural tendency was to focus on the places that I didn't want to go. And invariably, I would meander from side to side like a drunken sailor. Finally, the instructor told me to pull over and stop the car. As calmly as he possibly could, he reminded me, just focus on where you want to go, not where you're afraid you could end up, where you have been or who is creeping up beside you. Spend most of your time looking forward out of the front windshield. This is a lot about like life, because at the end of the day, we get more of what we focus on. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Rachel Tipograph. Rachel is the founder and CEO of enterprise e-commerce marketing platform MikMak, which helps brands create a unified digital storefront across 200 plus online retailers. With clients like Bacardi, Colgate, Hershey's, and L'Oreal, Rachel is a former global head of digital and social media at Gap. She is recognized as a leading innovator worldwide, featured as a Forbes 30 Under 30, Who Are Changing the World, Marie Claire's 50 Most Influential Women in America, and Fast Company's Most Creative People in Business. We're going to hear Rachel's story of how she turned a crisis into opportunity. Before that, I want to kind of tell a funny story. Rachel, we recently got introduced formally by our mutual friend, Eric Tash, who's on the line. He was one of your first clients when you started MikMak, and he was at Prestige Brands. But I actually heard of you in March when I was speaking to my good friend, Lisa Shallett, who's also on the line, former partner at Goldman Sachs and an all-around badass. Lisa actually spoke at one of our Let's Talk a few months back on the topic of getting on boards. Lisa had reached out to see how I was doing during COVID. We got on the phone, we ended up speaking for 2 hours. And then it turned to ways to get inspired. And she mentioned how you and your friend Anda Ganska, from the CEO and co-founder of Notch, started this speaker series at the beginning of COVID-19. and how you were getting, literally, you just started the webinar, and then you started getting thousands of people to view it. I went to maybe your third of your series and was amazed at the talent you got to join this conversation. You literally had the leading CMOs and CEOs of these Fortune 50 companies. To give you guys some perspective, at one point during the call, Gwyneth Paltrow zoomed in and joined the call. It was freaking amazing. So Rachel, if you don't mind, if you can just kind of tell us about your story of like perseverance and you know, grit, and kind of how you've not only survived, you've thrived during this period of crisis. And guys, if you want, put your screen to speaker mode for this part.
Well, one, thank you and welcoming me into this space. You know, I just listen to whatever Eric tells me to do. So I had no context of what this is, and I'm honored to be included. And Lisa, thank you for the recommendation as well. And as you were talking, I'm like, I have to crack a beer because you're just fierce. I love your energy. I want to invite you into a MikMak meeting. So thank you again. Well, there's a lot to say. And I guess I could start from the beginning because, you know, when you're building a company, if you don't know the early moments, then it's easy to lose context. So 2020 will be the most successful year in my company's history. And there's no way I could have ever predicted a global pandemic and the acceleration of e-commerce. But I'll give you context on what the early years were like, because they certainly weren't like 2020. And there were plenty of moments along the way where I could have completely given up. So the MikMak story is I ran global digital at Gap from 2011 to 2014. I was a total wildcard hire. The company had a decade of declining sales and aging customer base. And the senior leadership team at the time looked around the room and their target customer wasn't at the table. So they decided to hire me to lower the average age of the customer. And I reported into the global CMO. At the time, it was this guy's name, Seth Fardman, who I have a lot to owe to because he took a really big chance on me. And, you know, between those years, the net profits of the company at the time increased by 70%. Digital went from 5% of the overall revenue to 25%. And it really launched my professional brand. And while it's a very different story at Gap today, I still have so much heart for that company. But when I was there, I saw an opportunity in the market. If you think about Gap, it's one of America's oldest direct-to-consumer brands. But while I was there, I continued to see our rising search results within Amazon. So America was going into Amazon and looking up Gap jeans. Gap is still not available for sale as an authorized seller in Amazon. It was early signs to me that the major e-retailers were about to become the new walled gardens. And that's when I decided to quit my job and turn my life upside down to build MikMak. Now, this is towards the end of 2014. And if you remember the digital ecosystem then and the venture capital ecosystem then, it was kind of this world where if you had an idea, you created an iPhone app because that's how you got venture capital funding. So I fell into that trap. I took my vision for the future of media and commerce, which was highly distributed, and then I decided to build an iPhone app because I thought that's how you got investors. And you know, one of the things about me is I'm pretty self-aware and I know what my strengths are. And one of my strengths is storytelling and sales. So I could have been selling used cars to venture capitalists and I was able to raise money. And I say all this because I didn't do my proper diligence. I didn't pressure check my business plan. I just used my charisma to raise money. And I raised money. I launched this iPhone app in June of 2015 called MikMak. People described it as QVC for Snapchat. So I had comedians hawking products through social video. And I ran that business model for about a year and a half. And then in summer of 2016, I mentally paused and I said to myself, this is not going to work unless I have the scale of eBay. meaning sunk costs into customer acquisition, customer retention, not owning my inventory, video production. I was making pennies on every transaction. At this point in time, I had 15 employees and I was starting to run out of money. And I knew I had to change the business. And the first step for me was working up the courage to accept the fact that my initial idea was not going to be the winning idea. The second thing that I had, so that was about my ego. The second thing that I had to do was work up the courage to tell my investors that I'm not actually going to ask you for more money right now. Instead, what I'm going to do is cut the burn, meaning cut my operating expenses, and give myself the time to figure out how to turn this business around. So my biggest and main investor at the time was this guy named Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you guys know him. He's an internet personality. He's the founder of VaynerX, VaynerMedia, and honestly, like a brother to me at this point. And that was a really difficult conversation for me to have because Gary took a huge chance on me. He wrote the first check into the company. And I essentially told him, like, this is why it's not working. These are the key 5 things that I've learned. And this is why I believe I need to change the business from a consumer model to an enterprise software model. And I essentially presented him that. And he goes, Rachel, why didn't you decide to do this from the start? This is a much better idea. And as I mentioned, I told you I was not planning to ask him for more money. And then he said, how much more money do you need to get this off the ground? So talk about like, whoa, a change in perspective and a vote in confidence. And then I told him, and he wrote me a second check. But I cut the operating expenses. I restructured the whole company. I had to do the hardest thing in my career and lay 14 people off. I cut my salary to $0. At the time, I was only paying myself $50,000. And then I spent the next 6 months figuring out how I was going to build an enterprise software company. And what I knew was that I needed to find my co-pilot. So I was doing all of this by myself, right? And I knew to build the enterprise software model of the company, I had to find a head of product and engineering that could take my vision and really turn it into enterprise software. And this name started running through my head of this guy that I had met a few months earlier in Cannes. And I called him up and I said, David, I'm changing the direction of the company. This is the type of head of engineering that I'm looking for. Do you know anyone? And he goes, I actually know the perfect person, but I can't connect you because I currently work with him. It would be a breach of his employment contract. Gave me the guy's name. I figured out a way to get a hold of him. Fast forward to today, he's been my CTO for the last 4 years. And we built this business together. And you know, my company now does mid 8 figures of revenue. We make 90% margins. We have grown 300% year over year since the beginning of 2017. We're one of the fastest growing companies in America right now. And to give you an idea of sort of the trajectory of the company ever since we made a pivot, is my whole thing is about being so close to the customer. So in a consumer world, obviously the end customer are people like us, but in a B2B services world like mine, it's making sure that I'm talking with the head of e-com at the world's biggest brands every single day. It's making sure that my team has impeccable Salesforce hygiene, meaning all the meeting notes go into Salesforce. There's complete transparency in the company. It's making sure that we have an executive dashboard where I can see all of the traffic that's going into my software, all the logins by role, title, portfolio company, and iterating on the product in real time. And so in the beginning of 2019, I took a really big bet in the future of e-commerce, and this is pre-pandemic. The thing about me in my career that's always led me in the right direction is I like to do the least sexy thing that's possibly available. So in the beginning of 2019, the least sexy thing that I possibly could do is figure out how to sell cheese on the internet, figure out how to sell ice cream on the internet. And so I stood in front of my board in the beginning of 2019, and I told them that the future of e-commerce was about to become online grocery, online liquor shopping. Now, the reason why I knew this is quite obvious for anyone. In the beginning of 2019, if you looked at a company like Kellogg's, 97% of their revenue came from brick and mortar. Only 3% came from e-com last year. If you looked at Moët Hennessy or AB InBev, 99% of their revenue came from on-premise, meaning restaurants, sporting goods, stadiums, liquor store. Only 1% e-com. It clearly could only go up from there. And so I say all this because my whole attitude in my whole career is do the least unsexy thing, bet on the things that obviously only can go up, and do them ahead of the market and be completely connected to your end customer. And often when you deploy that type of approach, you have to wait for the market to catch up to you. And so week of March 9th, my entire business changed, because take Kellogg's as an example again, which is a client of mine. 3% of the revenue was e-com pre-pandemic. Now it's 35% of their revenue. So think about that from a market share opportunity. And when that type of transition happens, of course, all the investment then trickles in terms of your tech stack and where you're going to invest in terms of e-commerce. And I don't know what everyone does. I was following the chat. I saw different industries, but I feel like betting on the least sexy thing and betting on areas where numbers can only go up will constantly lead you in the right direction.
So I want to kind of go back, Rachel, to what you were saying, that really dark period where you had to lay off a sizable part of your staff and you cut your salary to zero. Mm-hmm. How do you pivot to, because you have to pay bills. You have to get to a certain point as an entrepreneur when you get that low. How do you get the resilience, or how do you kind of keep on moving forward? I know you had to kind of pivot your business strategy, but how did you mentally get from point A to B during a dark period? Because you still have to pay your bills. You still have to, whether you have a mortgage or whatnot, feed yourself, right? How do you go from there to now, growing 300% year over year?
Yeah. So I first I have to acknowledge where I was in my life, right? So I'm 33 and I don't have kids. Hopefully one day I will. But at the time I was 29 when that happened. And so honestly, my only responsibility was to pay my rent in Brooklyn. And so I want to acknowledge that, because that's not everyone's reality at the time. But that was also why I took this huge chance in my career and I quit Gap, because it felt like the perfect time in my life to risk it all, quote unquote. So there was that. The second thing is that, I, much to my father's chagrin, I also depleted my 401k from Gap. You have to bet on yourself. Being an entrepreneur is about betting on yourself. And listen, I placed the right bet. I believe in myself. And this year, and I'm probably sharing too much, but I've made more money in my career than I've ever made in my whole life. But that's because I spent essentially a decade not making money. And I just really believe in myself. And I also believe in the worst case situation, which is MikMak doesn't work out. I gave it the good old college try. I learned so much. And I believe that I have very desirable skills that someone will hire me one day. And when that is your worst case scenario, then you will take all the risks in the world. And that's what I always do. I always say to myself, what's the worst thing that possibly could happen? And if it doesn't seem that bad, then I will go take the risk.
Wow. That is so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Rachel. I mean, kind of, as a founder, your story really resonates with me, especially that part about just betting on yourself. It's kind of fun. We actually did that topic probably 3-4 weeks ago. Where at the end of the day, you should be the person that, you know, is rooting for yourself to win. So we're going to do a quick breakout group. I want you to introduce yourself, your name, company, previous role, what you're looking for. Please note we keep these conversations private. What is said in the room stays in the room. We aren't recording anything in the breakout rooms. So for the next part, though a lot of times you guys don't actually follow my instructions, the question is, how are you dealing with this crisis currently? And, you know, just have that conversation with your group. I'm going to break you up into groups, and I will see you on the other side.
No,
This past few weeks have been like Cuckooville.
Yeah, this
But for sure.
learning thing's been tough, but yes, we're gonna make it happen.
Okay, good.
Hi there.
Hi, guys.
I hope you
How's
guys
it going?
had a great conversation. I'm gonna call on a few folks because Sharon, for our group, we kind of broke out and we kind of talked about what, you know, how we've been kind of dealing with this crisis. Sharon, I know you lost your uncle during this period, and you've had a career change, right? You're now this global CMO of Jellyfish. And you kind of talked during our group about, you know, this period of challenge and what you've kind of done to, I guess, thrive during this period of crisis. Do you want to kind of just share what you spoke about in our group?
Oh, sure. For me, as I said, you know, I really looked at this as an opportunity to focus on what really matters. I think when you're in the work environment, you know, I fashion it to be like a hamster on a wheel. You're just going and going and going. And rarely do you get an opportunity to like lift your head up and really examine your life, your relationship to your family, your friends, and what's going on. Because we kind of get stuck in this narrative of my career matters so much. I need to drive hard. I need to play it safe. And, you know, for me, the pandemic was really a gift because I got to stop, because the whole world stopped. And I got to really do that introspection and reflection around what was I doing? Where was I going? You know, when you talked about placing a bet on yourself, and in the pod that I was on last before I agreed to take this CMO job, I wasn't sure I was going to place a bet on myself. I was like, I don't know, can I really be a global CMO? I mean, yeah, I've done the work before, but do I really want to step out front and be the name out there? And I had to stand back and say, all the things you've worked for, all the things you've dreamed and wished for are right in front of you. Why aren't you taking that one step forward? And had I not had the space and time of the pandemic, I don't think I would have honestly done it, because I had gotten into this mode of play it safe. You've got a great job. You're at a great company. You'll be employed through the pandemic. You got good benefits. You know everybody. You know when you can slack off and sleep in till 10. You know all these things. And, you know, you tell yourself this stuff. But when I sat back and realized the only thing standing between me and all the things I wanted was just me. It wasn't anybody else. Every person I spoke to, this fantastic group, everyone was like, you can do it. You got this. But I was the one going, I don't know about that. But when I finally sat down and thought about it, Lan, and made that decision, it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It was like I had been released. It was like, yes, you got this. And every day since, I'm less than 30 days in, it has been phenomenal. I am so utterly thrilled that I made that step. But I mean, this is a tough time for everyone. And I've tried to really lead my team with empathy. I have team members across the globe. I have 2 team members who are both pregnant. One's not having a good pregnancy, one's having a good one. They're terrified. And I've really tried to lean in and be much more empathetic, much more thoughtful, and deliberate about how I lead them, how I communicate with them, and let go of sort of that previous learning of corporate America and treat people more as humans. How would you want to be treated in this moment?
It's funny. I remember us having those conversations, Sharon, because we had a one-on-one call, and it's funny because I remember like just being like, "You are amazing. You are awesome. What is there even any question?" Like, and it was kind of one of those things where I've had the same thing happen to me while I'm starting Community of Seven, where I would get a call from Adrienne or Sharon. I've gotten calls from you. Where people are just kind of like, sometimes when you don't have that, I won't say confidence, but like when you start doubting yourself, it's that time where you lean on your community, where you lean on your friends who are going to kick your ass and just tell you, you got this, you can do this, right? And I think all of us, we're at some point, we're going to be the strong one. And sometimes we're going to be the ones that need the help. And, you know, I was just kind of thinking about this before I got on this call. At the end of the day, what a crisis is, at its core, is about change. So hear me out. All change is a crisis, even a good change. However, a change becomes a crisis when we feel we can't control the situation. So if you're able to master change and adapt to change, you're going to be able to thrive during crisis. This crisis will produce some of the most powerful millionaires, billionaires in the world. But it's also going to produce some of the poorest people. You can decide which one you will be by the capacity and your ability to change and adapt to the environment. Change is the one constant we have in our life. How we manage change is how we will succeed in life. There's a season for everything. It says it in the Bible. Everything is seasonal. And what I've been really kind of focusing on myself is the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So in the next group, I'm going to break you out once again in other groups. And I kind of want to focus on, you know, we focused on identifying the challenges we were kind of going through. In the next breakout group, you know, what can you learn using what was learned today from Rachel's talk, from some of the conversations you've had with your other folks on the line to apply to crisis management? What's the one or two things that you are going to change today? Whether it's believing in yourself, whether it's, you know, finding, you know, an amazing group to kind of connect with, or to reach out to 4, 5, 10 different people that you haven't connected with in the past. I want you to kind of like, dig deep and kind of figure out what you can bring to the table. Before I move on to that, I'm gonna really quickly, I'm just gonna bring you up right here. And if you can kind of make it really quick, because I wanna make sure we end in time. So you have about 3-4 minutes to just kind of introduce yourself and also say, what are the three things that you're gonna do differently to get through this crisis? Okay, see you on the other side. And back. Hey, Adrienne, how you doing?
Hi, my love. I am well, thank you.
You look lovely today.
Oh,
It's like the hair.
I've been running the dog all day, and I have good teeth. I went to the dentist and physical therapy for my foot. Like, it's been one of the, like, today is just like packing Monday and Tuesday into one day.
That's funny. So you're taking care of yourself, which is great.
I am. Me first.
Exactly. Well, that's one of the things we were talking about in our first breakout group, which is during these times of crisis, taking care of yourself and the foundation is so important. And you can't forget to, you know, put your oxygen mask on first, you know. So before we go, thank you so much for making it today. I'm going to post the content for today's talk on the Community of 7 page within 24 hours. You can also connect with each other on the member page, and also look for us on the LinkedIn page to connect with each other. And before I go, I kind of want to read you this one kind of quote. And this is, I get this daily word each day. Tethered ships that float securely in a coastal anchorage are rocked by the waves and wind, withstanding the conditions while remaining protected. Damage may ensue, but the boats are safe and will not be tossed into the rocks or lost at sea. Like the ship, I too am secured and anchored. Aware that I am centered in spirit, I can better handle my life's condition. Fear abates, and I am able to think more clearly and make better decisions. Centered, I am more loving and compassionate. I may still face the same problems, but I'm not overwhelmed. I can weather any storm that comes my way. So I hope we all kind of tether ourselves to each other and to ourselves, that we take care of ourselves, that we don't forget to breathe and exercise and be good to ourselves. I hope we tether ourselves to our loved ones. Morgan, come here. Okay. I want to introduce you to one of mine ones. Just say bye. You want to say hi to everyone? She just came from soccer. This is who I tether myself to.
Oh, how big she is.
So
You get really big.
tether yourself to your loved ones and just be good to yourself. And I will see you at the next Let's Talk. And we have a mixer coming up this Friday. Look at our website on our events page, and it's a great way for you to meet other people. Okay?
Is that a background?
Yes, that's Dean Rick, and that's his background. I don't think he's actually outside in San
I
Francisco.
thought that was.
It looks real, right?
Yeah, it looks
Real. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Lan.
Bye.
As always, thank you.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye, Lan.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Carolanne. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Hi, Caroline.
Bye. Bye.
See you.